Hey everybody, welcome back to Detail. What I'd like to discuss today with you is associations. When I say associations, what I mean is, well, let's just give examples. For example, most of us have a favorite song, or most of us, like one genre of music better than another, or a genre of film or reading or art or something. We have preferences. And then, the question becomes, why do we have preferences? Somewhere along the line, something happens and we associate that something is better than something else. I mean, an ethical question comes in there, I guess, what's better than something else? And do you take a deontological view or a utilitarian view with ethics? But we're not going to talk about ethics. But regardless, at some point we're classifying things. That's what our brain does for us. That's the purpose of our brain, is to help us understand the world. From a more spiritual perspective, I'd say it's facilitate learning. But I mean, as I've said several times, we're going to start with what I would call the lower levels of things. Understanding the physiology of things, the psychology of things, if you will. Psychology, I guess, is sort of a branch between biology and philosophy, is how I would describe it. But, we'll start with that base and then gradually work our way up towards more things. Interestingly enough, that's exactly how our brain is structured. And did you know that? The lower brain and the upper brain, we could talk about that. I mean, what we think of as the upper parts of the brain are the more humane things, more formal thought, decision-making, things like that. It literally works in a manner that's raising toward the top. When people say reptilian and mammalian, the reptilian part's your lower brain, literally, brainstem, medulla, corpus callosum, those things. Then it comes up and you get into, higher, more complex thought. And that's, interestingly enough, one of those, what I would say is like a universal law. You see it paralleled everywhere else. We tend to think of, as, heaven above us and hell below, right? Chakras, you talk about activating your root chakra and then moving up through your head and shooting out your crown chakra. I mean, things seem to happen in that ascending manner. I guess the question there, which we're not going to address today, becomes, do things happen that way because we believe they do, including our physical structure, or do we believe things happen that way because of our physical structure, right? It's one of those questions. I've seen, someone that figured out a way to actually map like the connections of neurons in your head, and interestingly enough, I mean, they're all at right angles, right? Just like Manhattan, not like London, like Manhattan. Everything's at right angles and goes like that through your brain. It's interesting, and I thought, I wonder if that's, do we make our roads that way because of that? Why do we think straight is better and all these other things? And, or our brains like that because we're used to that from other things? Are we altering the physiology of our brain over time? I'm not talking about that today, but it comes up and it's interesting. Associations, to give an idea, there's a structure in your brain called the area postrema. It's in the lower brain. What it acts as, the function of this part as we know it, and we don't know everything about the brain, and we're not even close. But as we know it, the function of this part of the brain is, you have the blood-brain barrier in your brain, right? It doesn't allow things, there's no capillaries in the arteries in your brain. So things can't pass freely from the arteries into your brain tissue. And it's a protective mechanism. You have the meninges and things like that to keep bacteria from getting in your brain, and meningitis and atrophy and things like that. So the function of this area is literally a taste tester. You think of a king used to have someone taste the wine to make sure it wasn't poison. That's what the area postrema does. It samples the blood to see if there's any toxins in it that can get through to the brain. I mean, it doesn't go straight to the neurons anyway. To some of the cell body, there's things that sample it after that, but this is just one level of protection. A real life example of this, and a good one, sadly, that most of us probably know. Has anyone ever maybe had too much to drink of a certain type of liquor or something, and now you smell it and it just reminds you of that horribly? Let's say tequila. I think most of us are probably familiar with that. So if you drink too much tequila, if your blood toxicity alcohol level raises above a certain point, then this area postrema samples it, and it knows that. And it coordinates all these other messages in your brain, so that the next time you smell tequila, you just don't want it, because it knows it's bad for you. Or if you've gotten sick from a particular type of food, you'll have the same type of thing going on. And it's a way of, avoiding like toxins and things that, of course, we can override it. But it's a way of avoiding those things so that nothing happens. Does it make sense? It's my belief, I don't know that a neuropsychologist would agree with me, but I would believe that, allergies are a very similar type of thing. Tear ducts, when you start crying, when you smell something, I mean, things like that. It's all, you just want to, get this stuff out, get this stuff out. Interestingly enough, most reinforcement and behavior has to happen like very close together. Like if I took a shot of tequila, then threw up, you would think that would, go straight to because that's how people at lower levels tend to work, but it doesn't work that way with this. If I eat, say, a bad chicken sandwich and, a day later I'm sick, it would still learn from that. So there's something else going on there, some sort of a metaphysical thing, because you'd think there's no way that could... Anyway, that's what happens with the blood. This serves that function with the blood. What I'm going to pose to you is that there probably, if we're speaking strictly physiologically, which you can't really have a purely physiological, when you're talking about psychology, in my opinion. I think you need the philosophy and the psychology. The psychology, what I would consider the more concrete stuff that we're going to talk about. But, for that example, let's just say that there's probably a structure in the brain then that does the same thing with emotions, right? So, someone continually hurts you. You begin to dislike that person. Maybe maybe you're a woman and it's a man, and so you generalize that dislike to all men. I'm just trying to show you how, associations can happen. We're not going to get into necessarily how to change it today. I just want to discuss it so we can have a base in it. So, say there's that structure, right? But it doesn't work perfectly. And it can't. The area postrema, we could say, we ate a chicken sandwich and then we caught the flu, a couple weeks later, but it can still associate the chicken sandwich with the flu. So our associations, with being sick, and they're like, oh, you don't want that anymore, right? But our associations, they tend to work. They're more powerful if, something very powerful happens right away. Something that's emotionally, has massive momentum and charge. It's massively emotionally charged, right? If I step on a plane and someone punches me in the face the first time I ever step on a plane, then on some level I'm going to associate that, and I'm going to be afraid of flying. That's a very extreme example, obviously. But, I mean, the two things would have nothing to do with each other, you see? Pain and flying have nothing to do with each other, but my brain would have associated that. Another way the brain learns conversely is if something consistently happens close to something else. Every time you call your mom, she complains to you. You're going to begin to avoid those conversations and put them off because you want to avoid being complained to, right? Or complaints about you might be more accurate. So you'll begin to put that off. Right? I know. In that case, the association might be valid, but that's not the point. So you can do that. And what's the other way? They happen consistently, strongly, and close. Well, that's it for now. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to show you is that the way we learn things isn't necessarily 100% true. The way we feel about things aren't necessarily connected to each other. It's how the schemas kind of work. I was walking down the street the other day, and I saw a man in camouflage, and that reminded me of Vietnam, and that reminded me of Vietnamese food. And then I realized I was hungry, and then I decided I wanted a piece of pizza because there was a pizza parlor down the road. From seeing a man in camouflage. That's how our thoughts happen. I mean, schemas, things seem to be randomly connected. They're likely not, but they seem to be, and they take us from one place to another. And our association is the way we feel about things, are not necessarily, if we examine those things, how we would feel afterwards. Right? And this goes back to the physiology and, the triad and how you can interrupt things. And, your posture is certainly connected with the feeling. That's why, your body language, that's why your tone of voice, your inner monologue, those are connected with emotions and feelings. So if you interrupt them, change them, you'll feel differently. You see? That's why that works. And then, the same applies to everything else that we talked about. Interrupting any one part of a pattern will interrupt the whole pattern that you're feeling. I call state a pattern. The state that you're in is a pattern of behavior, of thoughts, neuronic firing, and things like that. So, I guess to recap, we're kind of all over the place today, and you'll have that with me, so get used to it. I can't help it. I don't want to help it. It's worth examining how you're feeling about something because you don't want to go through life just bouncing back and forth from thing to thing and saying, "Oh, I feel this way because this happened." No, it's up to you. It's only the unexamined feelings, you know? We aren't reactionary beings. We aren't stimulus response beings by nature. But we can be, if you stay in that lower level. And as you begin to ascend, then you begin to see things more clearly, and use different parts of your brain, we'll call it, and things will, you'll see things in a different light. We've all seen this happen all the time. All of a sudden, you have an epiphanic moment. You understand something differently than you did before, probably at a greater level. It seems to happen instantly, because it does. But anyway, the sole purpose of this was, examine why you're feeling what you're feeling. Yes, there's going to be an irrational belief there, rational emotive therapy, or that we talked about. But it's also, it can just happen, but it doesn't have to. Just know that. There are other ways to feel than the way you're feeling right now. The interpretation is up to you. Whether or not you choose to interpret consciously is in itself a choice. There's always a choice. You always choose how you're feeling. Even if you decide not to make a choice, you're still choosing, right? That's all I have today. Thank you. God bless you. Have a good day.